Welcome to the Reborn Podcast with Tony Boutros, where we dive deep into topics that inspire, educate, and empower. Today, we have the privilege of speaking with Daniel Whitehead, the CEO of Sanctuary Mental Health Ministries. Daniel is a leader whose work is transforming the way faith communities approach mental health, and he brings a wealth of experience, insight, and passion to this critical topic. For those who may not be familiar, Sanctuary Mental Health Ministries is an international charity with a profound mission to equip churches and faith leaders to better understand and support mental health needs within their communities. Their resources like the Sanctuary course, blogs, and podcasts have helped countless churches engage in meaningful conversations about mental health. Sanctuary also leads initiatives like Healing in Color, which explores the intersection of race, faith, and mental health through the power of art. Daniel's journey to this work is inspiring in and of itself. After leading a church in England, he faced emotional burnout, which led him to pursue deeper studies in theology and mental health. Now, as the leader of Sanctuary Mental Health Ministries, he's helping churches and leaders worldwide embrace vulnerability, foster meaningful relationships, and reduce the stigma around mental health, especially in underrepresented communities like BIPOC populations. Today, we'll be discussing Daniel's personal journey, Sanctuary's impact, and practical ways faith communities can better serve those facing mental health challenges. So whether you're a church leader, mental health advocate, or someone navigating your own journey, this episode is for you. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Tony. Great to be with you. And thank you for that introduction. That's not intimidating at all with that long introduction.
I think you'll live up to it. I probably miss a few things even. So now, Daniel, you have had, and first of all, I've had the privilege of getting to know you a bit. I think the last almost a year now we've known each other, and you've had an incredible journey from church leadership in England to founding Sanctuary Mental Health Ministries. Could you, like I said, I probably missed a little bit. Could you start by sharing a bit about your background and what led you to this work?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so and one small correction. I didn't found Sanctuary technically, but I founded the new version of Sanctuary. So Sanctuary existed when I took it on, but I kind of reworked the model. And that's why I often get confused for a founder. That's not the first time that's happened. So yeah, my journey from leading a church. There are lots of moments in my life, Tony, when I pause and just go, I have no idea how I got here, but the overwhelming feeling I have when I feel that way is one of deep gratitude for the work that I get to do, because I really love this. So yeah, for me, I led a church in a small town. It was a charismatic church, a kind of independent church, full of lots of wonderful people who really loved God and did the best they could to love each other. But one thing that I can say in hindsight, looking back, was that it was ill-equipped to know how to hold the mental health subject. There were some people in the church who were like counselors, worked in Christian counseling, so there was kind of some stuff going on, but this was not a subject that was held in a way that people could access it readily. It was more of a niche subject for those people. So that's where I came from, and in my own journey of leading a church at a young age through quite traumatic circumstances, I reached a place where I was just emotionally numb and knew I had to move on, and that was very painful because I obviously cared about the people I worked with, but my wife and I both decided we needed a change, and so moved to Canada, took a year out to study, do some theological study at Regent College, Grad School of Theology. And what started as a one-year hiatus has become the last 10 years. I did a double master's in theology, and I took on this little nonprofit called Sanctuary. So it is a remarkable story, because the nonprofit I took on was me and initially me and one other staff member. So and it's grown significantly from that from that space, because it was a local ministry rooted in
Yeah.
Vancouver. Now we've moved on to this international scale.
And now it was you and one other employee. Now you're how many employees?
I think we're equivalent of about 15 or 16 full-time. We've got a mix of full-time and part-time, but it's probably
Gotcha.
about 20 people that work for Sanctuary now.
So
Yeah.
you've literally 10x the organization in your time being there,
Yeah, and more than 10x the
providing
budget.
opportunities.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
You said something that really piqued my curiosity, which is you said you had traumatic circumstances in your time leading that church. Can you dive a little bit deep into that? I don't know, is that something
Yeah,
you're
of course.
comfortable talking about? Okay.
Very, very much so. Yeah, so I was the youth pastor. I was a part-time youth pastor in the church, and the senior pastor, who was like probably my closest friend at the time. Yeah, I got married on April the 8th, 2006. And a month later, so I was a youth pastor. A month later, on May the 8th, my best friend, mentor, and senior pastor was diagnosed with cancer.
Mm.
And a month after that, on June the 8th, he died. So, I'd been married by the time, we'd processed that. And the church then asked me to lead it. The elders approached me and said, we'd like you to lead the church. I was 23 when they asked me, and been married like 5 months and processing the loss of someone I cared about deeply. So, yeah, I think that when I think about traumatic circumstances, I think about that. And I think about that church had a number of historically sad, not through their fault. It was just lots of sad endings to how leaders had left the church.
Yeah.
So yeah, I came into an environment that I think was, in all honesty, suffering the effects of trauma,
Yeah.
and but no way of understanding that, or talk, even the language or idea to frame that. So I came into an environment that I think was grieving and traumatized, and I myself the same. But it takes a few years to work that out sometimes.
Yeah. It sounds like you had almost a similar experience both with that church and now with mental health sanctuaries, in the way that it came in. You went in
Mm,
unexpectedly.
mm,
Sanctuary Mental Health is now a international nonprofit,
yeah,
and in the church you were leading went from
yeah,
being youth pastor, being
yeah,
someone who's in his early 20s, just got married. And I imagine it sounded like you were leading a church that had an older population that like,
yeah,
you know,
absolutely, yeah.
and I know personally, like that can lead to, who am I to
Mm,
lead these people who are 2-3
mm,
times my age? And
hmm Yeah,
has
yeah.
that been any?
No, that's a real thing. Imposter syndrome is a real thing, and
Yeah.
I don't think it's something. People talk about it like it's a really bad thing to, like embarrassed to say they have imposter syndrome. I mean, I
Yeah.
think there's a healthy sense in which all of us should have imposter syndrome. We're children of God. I'm like, yeah, but we don't behave like it all the time, do we? So
Mm,
there is a sense in which God is always calling us to be more than we are, and we are more than we are because of Him, because of His Spirit and His grace that is revealed in our lives every day as we stumble our way through life, and God just keeps graciously using us. But yeah, my story vocationally, I think both with the church and with Sanctuary, has been a story of um punching above my
mm.
weight. Like, why am I here? Why are they asking me? Whose whose idea was this? These are the kinds of feelings I've felt in both my former vocation and in leading Sanctuary.
How do you feel about almost being an underdog, punching above your weight? How has that
Mm.
journey been versus going into an
I
already established, like,
Yeah,
it's
I quite
all
like it.
everything's in place? Okay.
I like it. I think it suits me, and I think it suits the demographic of people we serve. I think
Hmm.
that's the thing. A few years ago, I was kind of lamenting one day, I guess to the Lord, but just, Lord, this work is really hard. There's never enough money, and you're always trying to hustle. It's just a hustle,
Yeah.
and I kind of felt the Lord. I felt like the prompting was, well, yeah, but the people you serve are marginalized. The people you serve are not
Mm,
heard. So if you feel marginalized and not heard, then you know how those people feel.
yeah.
And that's also kind of how Jesus felt in his ministry. So that there
Yeah.
is a pastoral sense of like, well, yes, Daniel, you're in the communion of the saints. This is what it is. So and I also think scarcity breeds innovation. And we all dream of not having scarcity. We all dream of having like
Yeah.
being able to just action our dream plan. But I think if I mean, I don't mean to be controversial or mean to point the finger, but some organizations have too much. They get lazy.
Hmm.
They,
Yeah.
what are they actually doing? I heard someone the other day who works in the not-for-profit space in helping philanthropists give their money away, and they said, our big thing is a lot of these big non-profits, they just spend money on marketing. All they're doing is like
Hmm.
promoting, but they're not really building their roots. Like, what are they actually offering? And Sanctuary probably suffers from the reverse. We focus very much on the depth of our work. We don't focus enough on how we sell our work. So
Yeah.
we're a bit of a best kept secret. But I quite like that space, the underdog. I think it suits me.
And it seems like that can be a almost better way, in a sense. It makes you more authentic rather than you are living in, a penthouse and have millions of dollars coming in and have never experienced mental health yourself versus
Mm,
being almost like in the trenches. Like, yeah, you have your team, but it's still like it's a grind, and it's something that I'm not just talking about, I'm doing it. For me, that's
yeah.
I was talking to a buddy the other day, and we were talking about. I'm like, the difference for me between a leader and a boss is a leader is they're front of the pack, and so they're doing the thing, and then they're leading the people either with them or behind them. And a boss is they're here, they're in the back, and they're going and shouting orders to everyone else, but they're not doing anything. So,
Yeah.
and I feel like it's the same thing a lot of times in business. It's like in any organization, a church, a nonprofit, a government organization, any organization. If the leader is not doing what they're going to tell their people to do, or hasn't been
Mm,
there, or the clients they
mm,
serve, then it just seems inauthentic, and it can
yeah.
get to a point where
Yeah.
they are they're they're almost resented, really, because
Mm,
their
yeah.
demands are too
No, I
great.
think that's true. I think that's true, and I think particularly for the younger generations, there is people are weary of inauthenticity.
Hmm.
Um, it's not like I'm gonna. You can say nice things about me. I'm not sitting here saying, "Oh, I'm so authentic." I like to think I'm authentic,
Yeah.
but we can only be self-aware so much. I think
Yeah.
I'm self-aware, um, but I think no. I think you're right. I definitely think you're right. I think you know to sit there as an expert in a space where you don't have any skin in the game. I don't think it really works anymore. I don't think people are going to listen,
Yeah.
um, unless there is a sense in which this person understands or has some skin in the game.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think you said a key thing is we. It reminds me of the verse, actually. He who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. If you're complimenting yourself, then
Yeah.
it's pride, right?
Yeah.
Which we're taught, and we know Jesus taught us not to have pride. I don't think necessarily that pride goes away, but I think you can place your pride not from being a
Mm,
nonprofit leader or a business leader or whatever
mm,
you are in this world to entirely and truly being in Christ. Now,
mm. Yeah.
having come from this place, and even still almost being in this place where you're punching up, you're trying to grow,
Mm,
you're trying to have this big impact, and you've had already a international impact. What habits or routines do you consider non-negotiable for maintaining balance in your life?
mm. That's good. I feel like I'm still working that one out. But some of the things, I mean, I can tell you in an ideological way, the things that when my life permits it. Um, Like I have to fight to have space in my life.
Mm,
And that's actually a big part of the vocation of a leader, I think. So that does mean, being boundaried about what you say yes to, what you say no to. Um,
mhm.
but more than that, it's about space for space's sake. It's about space because rest is important. And rest is also a place where, I mean, it's just a kind of biological fact that rest is a place where creativity occurs. So fighting to have a posture of rest as much as you can, as someone who isn't very good at resting, I'm very good at doing. And I'm not proud of that. But rest is something I think I find myself having to fight for, having to prioritize in the work that I do. I just think it's a very, very important practice for leaders
Yeah.
to have space to think, space to be, space to rest, space to so yeah, and I think busyness is the enemy of that. So I think that would be a non-negotiable. I also think well, it's non-negotiable for me that I'm passionate about what I'm doing, that I can stand up and make other people feel passionate about it because of the passion I carry. I think I couldn't lead an organization I didn't feel passionate about. It's just how I'm
Yeah.
wired. So that's a non-negotiable as well.
How would you say leaders can be intentional in getting rest? I feel like in the leadership
Mm,
space, we're often taught you have to, even you have to sacrifice sleep. Like you have to sleep 4 hours, 6 hours,
yeah.
and you have to work, 18 hours a day, sacrifice your family time, sacrifice your mental health, sacrifice
Mm,
everything, or else you're going
mm.
to fall behind the competition and
Yeah.
your business or your organization is going to go to zero overnight.
Well, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure business people would say that, and business leaders would, because if what you're pursuing is free market capital as your end goal, if all you're pursuing is the accumulation of stuff, then yeah, that makes sense. But there's a cost, and the cost. I'm not talking about a financial cost. There's a cost to
Hmm.
yourself. So it really depends which economy you're playing to. Because I totally get it. A business person who wants to just make as much money as possible, that's great. Obviously, that, and not to say that they have to be a a polar opposites, but what happens when you die? Like what difference does it make? And when you're on your deathbed, are you regretting not having made another $10 or
Yeah.
$100 or $1 million, or are you thinking about the relationships that you leave behind? So I think creating space is about investing in relationships, and relationships
Mhm.
fall under the category of God, your relationship to God, your relationship to other people, particularly people that you love, I would suggest, relationship to yourself, and I would also say relationship to creation, to the good
Mm.
creation God has made. Because what I've learned is I need to be outdoors every day.
Yeah.
I just need it. Like, it resets me. It makes me. I work better. I think better. I am better for being outdoors. Why is that? It's just because I'm a creature placed in God's creation, and that's how God's made me. So I think that's often a relationship people some people will talk about, but sometimes they talk about it in like a spooky way. I'm just talking about it in a very practical way, like being outside, moving my body, getting fresh air. That relationship to the good creation God has made is really probably another non-negotiable for me. It's important that I do that. And really all of this call to have space is about remembering who we are and remembering what we're here for, because who we are relational beings made in the image of a relationship, Father, Son, and Spirit.
Hmm.
We're made for relationships. You're not made to produce stuff. That's not your purpose. You can
Yeah.
produce stuff. You can do that in a godly way, but your purpose is entirely tied up in relationships.
Yeah.
So, and that's because God is a relationship. So that's it's critical that we remember that. That's our purpose. That's why we're here. And our purpose isn't to produce stuff, and that should be reflected in how we live and how we do business and how we lead and how we do nonprofit.
It reminds me of the verse Matthew 22 and 37 to 40, which I think is one of the most popular verses in the Bible, which is the greatest two commandments.
Mm,
First, love to God, love the Lord your God with all your mind, all your heart, all your soul. And
mm,
second, love your neighbor as yourself. I think
mm,
oftentimes people miss the order of things. which is first, love God. By loving God, you will understand what love truly looks like. And by understanding what love truly looks like, you will have the capacity to love yourself. And then by loving yourself, you will then have the capacity to love your neighbor.
Yeah.
Is there any certain, because I think there's so many different things, but is there any certain stigma around mental health in Christian communities that you desperately just want to see eradicated? And how can listeners contribute to this change?
Yeah, well, I think there is. I think there's a very particular and special sort of stigma that often exists in faith communities. So, one of those might be, well, it can actually work in a number of ways, but in one church, it could be like, well, really, this is just a spiritual matter. So the antidote is to pray more and read your Bible more, or to pray properly and read your Bible authentically. Like, if you do those two things properly, then you'll be like me, you'll be fine. There's that kind of advice, that very unhelpful advice gets given to people. So what that does is that conflates mental health and turns it into a purely spiritual issue. Conversely, some churches would say, oh, well, those churches are wrong. Really, it's a biomedical issue. What we need to do is send you off to doctors and mental health professionals, and they can, fix you, as it were. And once you're fixed, then you can be part of community and function like the rest of us in a normal way. These are the kinds of frameworks people have. And I'm going, no, that's wrong as well. It's not to say that there isn't a spiritual component. It's not to say that there isn't a biomedical component. There is both. But there are actually many components that make up a mental health journey. So it's biological, yes, it's spiritual, yes, but it's also psychological, because you have a psychology, you have an organ called your brain, and your brain works a certain way, and your brain can get out of sync depending on what's happened to you and what happens to this organ called the brain. And there's also a social reality. Our reality is also defined by our relationships. If you take a child and you only speak hurtful words to them, you tell them they're useless from the day they're born, what kind of person do you think they'll grow up to be? So there are social realities. If you have a child and you tell them every day that they're loved, that you're proud of them, that they can do all things, that they're fearfully and wonderfully made. If you tell a child that, how are they going to grow up to be? We know this stuff. So the point is, a human being is never one of those things in isolation. A human being is always biological, always psychological, always social, always spiritual, and it's always those four things all of the time. And all four of those aspects of who we are impacts the other three. So when one is diminished, the others are diminished. When one is strengthened, the others are strengthened, because God has made us to be holistic. So I think the specific form of stigma that kind of addresses is that in many churches, we have a very siloed way of thinking about these things. And that's innate. It's just in the tradition of certain churches that, well, you're spiritual when you're at church, you're physical when you're at the gym, you're psychological when you're thinking in the way that Western medicine and Western society says you should think, and you're social when you're with your family or with people who think just like you. And I don't think those things are true.
That's a lot to unpack. What would you say, with all that said, what would you say Sanctuary does differently to truly cause transformation in the lives of people going through mental health challenges versus what typically, as we were just talking about, we typically see where it's almost one extreme or the other, with either therapy or it's just read your Bible and pray? What is the difference there?
I think the gift that Sanctuary gives communities that use our resources, which cost nothing, it's a total kingdom thing. We give them to churches. The gift that it gives them is the ability to have a conversation that is safe, that's informed in this holistic way. And the fruit of that is you have a shared framework, a theologically underpinned framework for understanding mental health. So you have the framework, you have the language, you have the actual tools to know how to speak about it. Because many well-meaning people use unhelpful language. And as one of our ambassadors, Reverend Professor John Swinton, says, with our language, we create realities. So many people create unhelpful realities by trying to be helpful, but they don't even know what language to use. So the course gives you the framework, it gives you the language, and most of all, it gives you the permission and validation. So for someone in the midst of crisis whose story may never have fully been revealed or fully been opened up in community, which is exactly where it should be opened up. The Psalms of Lament, many of them were songs of ascent. They were sung in community. So they may sing that these Psalms, the songbook of the Bible, 40% of which are lament. So the songbook of the Bible, the worship book of the Bible, 40% of those worship songs are lamenting about life. And many of them were sung in community, but sing about an individual's experience. So, God, why are you far from me? Sung in community. So I think there's a big clue there for us that the church needs spaces to talk about these things. People need spaces to be heard. And the Sanctuary course is a really great way of creating a safe place for people to do that.
So I've recently gotten called into part of a church plant. And part of what I'm doing is working on both the marketing, so helping them impact more people, but I'm also helping them develop programs, specifically around leadership and redemptive entrepreneurship. With my church, we're called New Heights, led by Pastor Ken Johnson, who was the Indianapolis Colts chaplain for, I think, 32 years and an international evangelist. How can churches like New Heights, and any church really, how can we better equip ourselves to address the mental health needs, especially when it comes to BIPOC communities?
Yeah, well, I mean, aside from me saying use the Sanctuary course, use the Sanctuary Youth series, use Sanctuary resources, at its core, I think what churches need to do is to find a way to listen deeply to people's stories, to give people permission to live into their authentic story, to listen deeply, to suspend any preconceived ideas of what a human life should look like, and instead listen to what a person's life is, and to commit to helping those people to find Jesus in the midst of their stories, many of which are difficult stories. Because I think this mental health is not like an optional extra or a bolt-on, and it's not a nice thing to do. It is the gospel. It's a gospel thing. And the church of the future that flourishes, particularly with the younger generations, will be a church that listens, and it will be a church that talks about things like mental health, because the younger generations have a very different parameter or way of seeing the world. And I think this is one of the subjects that the young people are telling us this is important to us. Our emotional lives, our mental health, we're struggling. One in 3 young people are currently experiencing a mental health crisis. The book by Dr. Jean Twenge, Generations, I could quote you stats from it, but I kind of don't want to jar your audience. But you can go read that book, look at the research that is happening with young people's mental health. It is terrifying. So I think this is a gospel issue. I think it's a Jesus issue. And the bottom line is the body of Christ followers, has depression. It has bipolar disorder. It has psychosis. So of course we should talk about it. This is what people are experiencing. And Jesus should be involved in that, not just in a slapping a band-aid kind of way, not just in a reducing symptoms like a medical model. This is about addressing the latent power in the community of God, the hands and feet of Christ, the latent power of the love of God expressed through a community. You can actually change people's lives, and you can help people find flourishing if you give them loving communities who will listen and walk with them.
You said 1 out of 3 people, young people, are going through a mental health crisis. Just for clarification, how do you define young? Is that under 30, under 40?
No, I mean that's talking about teens. I mean,
Gotcha.
like youth.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be youth. I mean, there's all kinds of researchers out there. The Mental Health Commission of Canada released some research, and it's still startling to me. I'm like, it's just unbelievable. It says that by the age of 40, 50% of people will have had a diagnosed mental illness.
Wow.
Just stop and think about that. That's remarkable. That's where things are heading. So we're in a crisis. The World Health Organization says we're on the cusp of an epidemic of loneliness. We're lonely. We've never had more, in inverted commas, friends on Facebook. Oh, I've got 5,000 Facebook friends. Yeah, but we've never been more lonely. So
Right.
again, our culture is embarking on an experiment that is not working, and all the research shows us this, it's not working. And so what is the antidote? The antidote is the church. The antidote is community of God's love, who should be a prophetic statement, you know, implicitly opposed to this disembodied screen-based way of being. Like,
Yeah.
the church is meant to be the antidote to that. It's like, no, living in community and being seen in community, being held in community, having people hold space for you when you can't hold it for yourself. That's the goal of the church. And that, if you could equip the church to do that in society, you would make a massive dent in that global epidemic of loneliness. I think you would
Yeah.
eradicate it. You would make a massive dent in the mental health crisis if people knew that they were seen and loved as they were, and that people would walk with them through their journeys to see them flourish once more, which always happens through relationship. It doesn't just happen with medication and therapy. Those things are good and we need them,
Yeah.
but it always happens in relationship. People need relationships.
Yep. I wholeheartedly agree with my own journey. I mean, I grew up in and out of intensive therapy, was in inpatient therapy for a week, and I don't think I truly recovered until I got in healthy community,
Mm,
which was in the form of, for me, like men's groups, a couple of different Christian, like praxis, Christian, like business groups,
mm,
and really, like, so I actually recently started an online community and hoping to do some in-person retreats as well, but it's based off the verse Proverbs 27:17. As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another.
mm,
And I did that because I literally grew up in a school in high school that is bigger than some colleges, 7,000 people in the high school. And I was an outcast. I had no friends, no community, no
mm,
relationships. And so I've been there on the outside looking in, trying to find that community and just feeling so lost and hopeless, and seemingly like all I can see is darkness.
mm,
And in a couple of years, I've been able to build a great community of, I say, mentors, peers, and mentees, of people that are behind me that I'm, trying to basically people who I see my past self in, who I'm trying to help,
mm,
mentors who I'm learning from, and peers who, kind of same season. And my thing also is, like, you can learn from any of them. I have a mentor who's,
mm,
I think, in his 60s, 70s, and has had a lot of success, both as a man of God, like great marriage and all that, but also in business. But if you approach a mentorship as, I have so much to give, you're already coming at it wrong.
mm,
And instead, you need to come at it as, like, yeah, I have a lot to give, but I also have a lot to learn.
mm,
Um, I think the coming generations, I think we're seeing a lot more young people who are interested in doing their own thing, going outside of the
mm.
societal norms, not necessarily going to college, starting a freelance business,
Yeah.
starting some sort of venture. What's one piece of advice you wish you had received when you were starting, or when you not
Mm,
founded, but when you started your role with Sanctuary Mental Health Ministries?
mm. Well, I mean, yeah, for me personally, because of the way I've been shaped by my circumstances and culture and society, for me personally, the message I need to hear was, um, like, Daniel, you you can achieve a lot
Mm,
if you're your authentic self, which is a very counter cultural narrative. Um, I think generally, like, historically, that would be the last thing you want to do is be yourself. You want to be anyone but yourself. You need to be like this archetype,
yeah,
and then you'll be successful. Well, you'll be successful. You probably will be successful, but just for me, I meet people all the time, and it goes back to your earlier point, and it's true. If I sense inauthenticity in a person, I mean, I'll be polite, but I'm not going to invest in that relationship.
Mm.
I'm not going to give time and energy to that. If it's someone that I feel like can help Sanctuary's mission, I'm going to go, well, okay, I'll keep trying, but I'm not really going to invest. But if there's a human being in front of you where you feel like, hey, this person's authentic, they're not perfect, but I would much, for me, I always say the greatest quality I would look for in hiring a person, and the times when I've got it most wrong is when I haven't listened to this, is someone who knows themselves.
Mm.
Like self-awareness is by far the most valuable commodity, and I think it will increasingly be that in the society of the future, because so much of the skill-based work is going to be automated. It's just not going to, you know, I listen, I love math and I'm pretty good at mental math, but if you're really getting upset over not learning math, I wouldn't be too worried. Like, honestly, you're gonna be fine. If grammar's not your thing, you're gonna be fine. Trust
Yeah.
me. Chat GTP can help you a lot with your grammar when you write emails. So, the people of the future who are going to be shaping the future, I think, are going to be people who know how to connect with other people.
Yeah.
I think that becomes the precious commodity. And to connect authentically with other people, you have to know who you are. You have to know what you're good at, what you're not good at, what you're strong at, what you're not strong at. And when you've got a person who thinks they're brilliant at something and they're just not, I'm brilliant with people and they're not, it's hard. It's like, oh, this is hard. This is like, you don't
Yeah.
know. So being aware of who you are is probably the thing I would, and so I would say to myself and to any young leader, like, just get to know who you are and be okay with it. Like,
Mm.
you have flaws, but you have strengths. So work out your strengths and get people to help you with your flaws and be honest about them. That's what I'd say.
That's good. How would you balance being in a leader position and a mentor position? How would you balance the concept of investing in someone who might not yet know themselves, but they're
Mm.
really trying? But
Mm.
oftentimes it almost feels like you are pouring out continuously and they're really just not taking the required action, but they have that desire. How do you balance that with, like, okay, I can't keep investing in you if you're not gonna make true
Mm.
change. We can talk for hours and hours and hours, but if nothing changes, nothing changes.
Mm. Yeah, I think you just have to discern that one. I think it depends on the strength of the relationship you have with the person. But I think, if there's trust and there's love, then I think you can say difficult things when there's trust and there's love in that
Yeah.
relationship. And if there's not trust and love, then I go, well, what is the relationship really going to achieve? I mean, it's not.
Hmm.
So maybe I would get there sooner than other people, but I think I'd go, I'm not sure this is going to work, because I think this is how we need to operate. But I
Yeah.
would always be looking for mutuality, reciprocity. I would not, you know, all of the people that I talk to in that way, um, that's how I enter into the relationship. It's like, well, yes, you have loads I want to learn from, and I really want
Yeah.
to learn, but not to the detriment. I don't sit there thinking that I've got nothing to teach you. I don't think that. No,
Hmm.
you can learn from me. You can learn from anyone. You can learn something from anyone.
Yeah.
Everyone in the world can teach you something, even if it's how to thread a needle more effectively. Like, but I think having that posture is really important. It means you stay curious. So I think whatever mentoring relationship you're in, as long as you're curious as to why is this person not able to get hold of this? Why is this person not able to see this? Why does this person say
Yeah.
they want this but they don't? I think you'll ask the right questions and you'll discern the right way.
Yeah. How do you make difficult decisions when you have someone like that in your organization? So when it comes to navigating the intersection of faith,
Mm.
I want to keep investing in this person. They're a good person. They
Mm.
have a good heart, but I'm also running an organization that
Yes,
needs them to
get stuff
perform.
done. Yeah, you got to
Yeah.
get stuff done. Well, yeah, and that's a very good question. I think um, I think it's important that making difficult decisions are meant to be difficult. Otherwise, they wouldn't be difficult decisions. If you're making difficult decisions easily, then you're probably not doing it right. So, whatever decision you've got to make, let's say that's losing a person or something. I don't know. I'm thinking of a really bad scenario. Like, that should be difficult. If it ever becomes easy to lose a person, like to fire someone, then I think you're probably not living the way you're meant to live. Those things are meant to be hard. So first of all, you embrace the difficulty of that. Second of all, yeah, the balance between getting stuff done and investing in a person you care about is really hard. But again, you have to kind of discern. I don't think maybe there is a black and white algorithm on it, but I think it's more something you discern. And then I think the way you break up, or the way you, is also really important, because you want to humanize the person as much as possible. You don't want to, the way of the world would be they're just a commodity. The commodity isn't working for you. Get rid of them. They're irrelevant to you. I'm like, yeah, that's exactly the way business works. But we're not called to operate that way. This may be your brother or sister in Christ. So, this is someone who Jesus died for. There's someone of immense value. Doesn't mean you can't disagree. Doesn't mean you can't argue. Doesn't mean you can't say strong words to each other. But it does mean that you will do everything within your power as required to ensure that if you bump into that person again, you can greet each other in a way that is kind and civil and compassionate. And I can think of a really good story that happened to me many years ago when I was leading a church. I was actually a member of the church that there was this falling out. And I think it was necessary, but it was very painful. There was someone I cared about deeply, but they left the church. They were not happy. There was a lot of hurt. And I didn't see this person for over a year. And then one night, I had a dream about this person. I'd never dreamt about them before, but I had this vivid dream. And I woke up in the morning and I thought, I feel like I should contact them. I feel like maybe it's time. Like, why did I dream about this person? I went down, sat at my desk in the church. I was about to write an email to this person. And then I thought, no, I'll send a text. I went back to my text messages and I'm like, I can't send a text or an email. I need to go talk to them or write them a letter. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to pause. I'm going to think about it today. And at the end of the day, I'm going to make a decision. I'll either knock on their door, write a letter, send an email. I'll work it out. I need to think about the best way to reach out to them, because last time I saw them, it wasn't good. Within 5 minutes, this is no word of a lie. Within 5 minutes, my phone made a ping sound and I had a text message. And I looked on the phone and it was a message from this person. And it said, "Hey, Dan, I had a dream about you last night." And I felt like God was telling me I should reach out to you. And to me, it was mind blowing. I realized how passionate God is about reconciliation, how passionate God is about the state of my heart. I believe like God did that for me and for the other person, for the sake of our hearts. It was like there was a wound that needed fixing. So I think we do well to remember that in whatever the difficult decisions we have to make, that do your best to humanize the person. Do your best to make it so that next time you see them in the street, you can look them in the eye and greet them as a brother or sister.
Yeah. Make it to the point where it's, I love you as a person, but I can't have you here. It's, and this is not like a God thing, but it's, Tupac once said, like, I still want to see you eat, just not at my table. Right. So it's not that because you're no longer in my life, I want to see you fail.
I want you to flourish.
And
and I actually think in those situations it's a painful move, but it's a move to help the other people flourish, because if they're not flourishing in your environment, they need to flourish somewhere else. So, and you can only do what you can do, right? Some people don't want to hear that and they're just like, I don't care, I don't like you. You're like, that's fine, I fully respect that, but for your own sake, to do everything you can, I think is important.
So we only have a couple more minutes. I have a few wrap-up questions for you. First off is, if you could leave listeners with just 3 lessons or truths, what would they be?
Okay. Firstly, I would say, I believe with all of my being that you are of more value and worth than you are ever capable of understanding. I think I found that to be true, and I still wrestle with it, but I believe it in my bones. Secondly, conversely, I would say it doesn't all hang on you, and you are expendable. Like one day you're going to die, and you better be okay with that because it will happen. So that beautiful juxtaposition of your immense value and also like, and God doesn't need you. So your value purely comes from.
Mm, wow.
And then thirdly, I would say have a go. Just have a go. Like, don't. It's just the way I see the world. But I see limitless possibilities in this world for incredible things to happen. And maybe that's easy for me to say with my experience. It hasn't always been easy for me to say, but I do think if you pursue what you're passionate about and you do it with the best intentions, then great things can happen. Not easy things, not hashtag blessed things, not things you necessarily want to put on social media, but deeply good things that can lead your life to have more meaning than you ever imagined. So
Mm,
have a go. Have a go. That would be my third bit of advice.
that's really good. I feel like we could have a whole another episode just on those three things.
Mm,
More value plus worth than you're capable of understanding. And yet, at the same time, know that God does not need you and that you
mm,
are expendable.
mm.
Like that seems like two polar opposites, but it's
Yeah.
so true and accurate. And then pursue passion. I think that's something that a lot of people want to do, but then they get caught up in things in the world, their lifestyle, and how they want to
Mm.
appear to their friends or social community. Like, oh, I'm just white collar job. Although
Oh
I would
yeah.
love to just start a small business, a small coffee
Oh,
shop, whatever it is.
and
Right.
listen, I live in Vancouver, Canada. There is a lot of that stuff happening because there's so much wealth in this city, a lot of poverty as well. But the what I've encountered, and I realized it, I said to my wife, when I first moved here, I'd meet with a bunch of people, bunch of men in their 40s, doing great, like killing it at work, making loads of money, living big, expensive houses, but none of them are happy. None of
Mm,
them are doing things that make them happy. And it's so sad. It's like, oh, this is your life. You've like it feels like a life wasted. I found this so many times. And I'll also tell you one other person I know who was a very senior hedge fund manager for one of the biggest banks in the world, a very,
mm,
very senior role. His life hasn't worked out so good. And let me tell you that role was not good for his mental health for sure. But one thing he said to me, and he's like doing deals with people who are multi-billionaires. He's like, can just call them up, and
yeah.
he's in all that, flies first class, stays in 5-star hotels. That's his life, or was his life. But I remember talking to him one time, and he wasn't happy. He was just struggling. And I said, "What's your dream?" And he looked at me and said, "I want to be a school teacher. I want to.
Mm,
If I could
wow.
do anything, if I could do it again, I would teach maths. Math. I would teach math at school." And to me, it was mind blowing. This was years ago that he said this to me, and I'm like, "You are literally at the pinnacle of success in the eyes of the world. You are what most people would aspire to be like, and what you're telling me is you're deeply unhappy. Your life, in many ways, is a mess, and what
Mm,
you really want to do is teach math. Why don't you go and teach math? Why don't you go and do that? You can do that." And he's like, "I can't. I'm trapped. I'm stuck. I'm in this thing. I can't get out." So sad. It's a life
wow.
wasted. Yeah.
That's amazing. Living for God, although it might be more humbling, will ultimately lead you to a more purposeful and fulfilling life, even if
I
it
hope
doesn't
so.
come with the riches of the world or the fame or the success or the glamour of
Mm,
5-star hotels and restaurants and first class flights.
yeah. But
This has been a phenomenal conversation, and I really appreciate you coming on. Um,
oh,
One quick question, if you have the time. I know we're towards the
mm,
end. Do you have one time
sure.
for one more?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
What is the one resource, belief, or practice you could not live without in your personal and your professional life?
Um, well, it's a weird one, but it just comes to mind. I think at my core, my belief is that most people most people are doing the best they can.
Mm,
So even if people are underperforming or behaving badly or doing, most of them are doing the best they can. And I think that is almost a naively hopeful posture, but I think it's one that serves me well. And I don't
yeah,
mind being a fool for Christ. I don't mind being foolish in some way. Being, so I think that's a posture that has just helped me to be who I am. I think most people are doing the best they can with what they've got, and so I guess that creates empathy. But I think
yeah,
live more empathetic. Living empathetically is important. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's really good. I think there's so many circumstances that we can never understand. Like we don't even know. I think you can live with somebody your entire life, your spouse, and not fully understand them. So how much is there about our
Mm,
partners, our employees, our clients that we don't understand, that we don't know?
mm,
And so just
yeah.
having that empathy, because you never know what someone's going through.
No.
How can listeners connect with you and get
Mm,
involved with the work of Sanctuary Mental Health Ministries?
yeah. Well, you can go on our website, sanctuarymentalhealth.org, or you can look us up on Instagram or Facebook. Um, but we have a bunch of resources you can use for free. You can access them on our website. Um, resources for youth, resources for congregations. Um, all of our resources are aimed at Christian worldview, but they can be used in a range of settings and circumstances. So if you have a Christian facing business, you can use our resources. But I would say, yeah, get online, check out our stuff. And I think my email address is on our website, which is dangerous, I know, but you can reach out to me. I'm
Perfect.
accessible. Okay.
Perfect. 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 Well, thank you so much for coming on, Daniel. This was amazing. And I'm really, really hopeful that this episode will truly make a transformation in the audience's lives. And if you're in the audience listening to this, thank you so much for watching, or thank you so much for listening. Um, and if you want to connect further, feel free to check out sanctuarymentalhealth.org. I'm going to put that in the show notes, so just below the video, the podcast, in the description. And then also feel free to join out. We have a free faith-driven entrepreneur community on a platform called School. So the link for that is school.com/reborn pack. Hope to see you inside, and have a blessed week.
Thanks, Tony.